So glad you could join us. Another edition of the Draft Show. His name is Scott Bischoff. My name is Sean Baligian. Scott, this is going to be a little interesting show because we're going to talk about where the Lions are at and what they need. And folks, I know you don't want to hear it because it seems like we've been saying it forever and a day. Scott, they need a lot.
A lot. We're done. We good?
Yeah. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Have a good week.
The Draft Show. No, you know what? Before we get into some of that, you know what? I do want to check in with you. I mean, news just came out. Carson Wentz is moved to Indianapolis for a third and a conditional second that could be a first. Number one, that was one of those deals that you have to sit back and fear the Colts. Why not? But to me, I think this makes the Matthew Stafford deal look even better.
Yeah, it does. I mean, so again, it was what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is that you're pushing those picks into the future. So that's the issue is, they're contingent upon the Rams' performance and then being a year from now and 2 years from now. But if you look at what the Lions got and you look at what the Eagles got, it's a world of difference.
Yeah,
it is.
Massive.
The first round pick has the potential to be, the second round pick has a potential to be a first round pick, and that is dependent on playing time and performance and team performance. So, it's reasonable to think it'll be a first, but I mean, do you want a third and a first, or do you want a third and two firsts and Goff? I know you don't like Goff, but he needs to be included in that conversation.
Oh,
you got him in the trade.
Yes, absolutely.
So it just makes what the Lions got so much more than what the Eagles got. And hey, shout out to Brad Holmes and crew. Good job being first. Going first mattered.
Oh, absolutely.
Really did.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And listen, I'm going to say it again. I don't mind a guy like Jared Goff for the next couple of years. When you're openly telling everybody, I mean, this is really what's going on. You're openly telling everybody, give us a couple years.
Yeah.
2-3 years. Yeah. I don't mind that for Jared Goff because you know what? Number one, do I expect him to succeed? I don't. But let's play a game of pretend for a second. Let's say he exceeds anybody's expectations, and suddenly he looks like a guy that was taken number one. Okay. You know what I mean? So to me right now, I don't mind it. I think for me, when I see the Lions taking the next step up when the roster is built, I don't expect to see Jared Goff as the quarterback.
He may not be, but in a perfect world, he plays well enough that you can flip him for future assets next year. He plays for the Lions for 1 year, and then he's 28, still young enough to play for somebody for a while. That's the perfect world thinking. It's interesting because getting into the where they are, we're not going to be competitive for a few years. Gets my brain thinking about the positions in the draft and where we are draft wise, and how do you time the picks that you're making. So right now we don't expect them to be super competitive. So that opens the window to taking a player that might take some time to develop, like a Kwity Paye type, who might end up being a really productive pass rusher in the NFL. I don't think that that's going to happen in year one, and probably maybe not even in year two. I don't think that he's that guy. He's a freaky athlete, big, as mobile as it gets. I just don't think that football-wise he's ready to come in and be super productive in year one. They can run the string out with him a touch. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about the timing thing. Like, if you take a receiver this year, the reality is you expect him to be productive as a rookie. They can be. But in year two, you really expect him to take that step, right? Yeah. So in year three, let's say you have a first-year quarterback with a very reliable receiver who's a known. That's the kind of thing where I think we need to be thinking about positionally, where are the Lions and where are they going to be, thinking that it's 2 to 3 years before they're competitive. Some positions you just wipe them aside. It's, why would you take a running back when that's the DeAndre Swift conversation, is he may run out his time as an NFL player before the Lions are real competitive, which is sad, and it's a bummer because he's a good player.
It would be very,
but
very
we're
sad.
Talking about him realistically needing another contract in Detroit before they're competitive. He's got 3 more years.
Yeah.
If they're not competitive for 3, are you re-signing him to a second deal? Most running backs don't get them.
It's $1 million question. It's funny, we were talking about that with Joyke Bell, and as you can probably imagine, he takes that very seriously
I'm sure he
because,
does.
that's unfortunate for the running backs. Very quickly, I want to say this because it seems like you and I have had this running joke for years. Doesn't it seem like for years now the Lions miss by one that guaranteed player every year in the draft? Like, what are we going to do at 7? What are we going to do at, if we only were one pick closer or whatever, you'd have that opportunity. Now, I want to get this out of the way. I don't know what Brad Holmes' scouting reports are on guys. I mean, for all I know, Scott, for all we know, he might love Lance right now, and he's not telling anybody. He might love Lance right now. So, I mean, I guess we're going to find out. But
What is that phrase that you have for him?
Take a chance on Lance.
Yeah.
ABBA.
I think
ABBA did a song like that, didn't they?
In the late 70s,
Take a
I
chance,
think.
take
I
a chance,
read
take
that somewhere.
Chance.
I hope that's in the plans because his upside is as high as any quarterback in this draft.
Yeah.
It really is.
It really is. Scott, it's going to be very interesting because, as you said, there are a myriad of directions and that they could go with. Forget about 7. They could get out of 7 and say, there's a package that we love that gave us, an extra pick in the first round, maybe an extra pick next year in the first round, or a second round pick and a third round pick this year. If the name of the game right now, and I think we can all agree, for the most part, we can all agree, if the name of the game is rebuilding this, okay, then bring all those draft
Bring
picks.
the picks on, yes.
Get a wheelbarrow.
Yes. Potential wrench in the works is the Carson Wentz trade. Now Philly is sitting at 6 in front of the Lions and potentially needing a quarterback. I'm not saying they do because they still have Jalen Hurts and he's a young player, but it wouldn't surprise me if they went quarterback because they weren't completely sold on Hurts. It would not surprise me. So you mentioned it. The Lions have always been one pick away. Well, we have another quarterback needy team in front of them where it's either trade out potential or, they may take the quarterback. So that's something to think about, that there's some ramifications from that trade that might alter what happens in Detroit.
Do you know what I think people still don't take into consideration? And I know nobody wants to hear it, okay, because we've been burned before. But I'm just looking at your list right now. The wide receivers under contract right now for the Detroit Lions are – how many people know the answer to this? Seriously. How many?
I don't know.
Right? Quintus Cephas.
Geronimo Allison.
You could say Geronimo Allison as well.
Victor Bolden was signed to a futures deal. I don't know what his future is.
Do you bring back a guy like Mohamed Sanu?
I don't know.
Right. I mean, that's where we're at right now with the Lions. It's insane.
It is going to be a very interesting position to look at with how they address it, because you have Kenny Galladay. So the wild card in the entire next couple weeks is going to be what the Lions decide to do with Kenny Galladay. It just is. Tagging him is going to cost a bunch of money. It's easier on their cap if they sign him to a multi-year contract because you can spread that out over several years, but I'm not sure that he wants to be here, and I'm not sure what the Lions think of him. We don't really know. But right now the Lions are they're actually over the cap, and you'd have to clear, 17, 18, 19 million dollars a season for him. And in order to do that, there's going to be painful decisions that have to be made. There just are. And there's only a few players that you can look at to make that happen.
Can I use my deductive reasoning that sometimes isn't very deductive? I think you're almost forced to sign Kenny to the offer sheet and then flip him.
Okay.
I think that's a position that I mean, do you agree with
I
that?
agree.
I really think that's where they're at right now.
I think that's kind of what they have to do. Otherwise, let's just go there. So we're restructuring Flowers. That saves you $9 million. Now, I don't know what the cap is going to be, but it's not really relevant to what we're talking about. We're talking about savings.
188.
Okay.
It's going up to 188.
But we're not in this.
I get what you're saying.
In this discussion, we're not talking about there being a cap. We're just talking about how much money they can save. So, restructuring Flowers gives you $9 million. Then you're cutting Jesse James. That saves you $2.1 million. You're cutting Chase Daniels. Saves you $2.3. You're cutting Justin Coleman. Saves you $4.9. You're cutting Desmond Trufant, saves you $6.2, and you're cutting Danny Shelton. All those things get you to $27 million. So you've got to make all those moves to have the ability to sign Kenny and a few other guys. Now, if you're tagging and trading Kenny, you don't have to cut all those guys. So to me, it makes sense what you're saying to tag and trade. Now, I don't know what the compensation would be.
I don't either.
I would hope that you would be able to get, I don't know. I mean, do you think you'd get a second-round pick for him?
I'd hope so. I mean, what I
don't
would
know.
sell people, the problem is obviously the injury, but I would sell people, look, before he went down last year, in my opinion, Scott, you could make the argument that he was in the neighborhood of top 10 wide receiver.
He is. He's more of a contested catch player. He's not a vertical separator so much. He does with his physicality. He does. I mean, it's dismissive of his game to say he doesn't separate vertically because he's a very good vertical receiver. It's just he does it physically. And at the catch point, he's dominant. So he needs a specific type of quarterback. And I think like the Rams would value him in their scheme, in their system, because he gives them something that nobody on their roster has. They don't have the money to pay him. But he's going to require a player like Stafford who is willing to put the ball into a 50-50 scenario and give him a chance to go get it. He comes down with it more often than not. But he's not going to be appealing to every team.
Sure.
So I'll just tell you this, that if the Lions flip him for a second-round pick, you can replace his production with a receiver that you would take in round 2 this year.
Absolutely.
You can.
There's no doubt in my mind.
And that's why it's a no-brainer to
There's
move
no doubt in my
him.
mind. Yep.
Should the Lions be where they are right now, not being super competitive, paying a receiver $17-18 million a year for 4 years?
No.
So I think the tag and trade makes a lot of sense. Whether or not that's what happens, I'm not really sure. But that's the driver of a lot of what's going to happen. So even if they do this with Galladay, even if they sign him, they still need a receiver. You still need one more or more than one more. You do.
Multiple more.
You do.
Honestly, you really do.
You do. And then there's a hole at the linebacker position, but I think it's untenable to make the argument that you should be drafting a linebacker with the 7th pick. I just think it doesn't make good football sense to do it.
Sorry, Mr. Parsons.
I'm not saying Parsons is a bad player.
For this team right now, I think in general, to me, I think it's a value thing. One man.
An off-the-ball linebacker is just not that.
I just think that's a value thing.
And to be honest, I think there's a player later that you could get late. Let's say, you're in Zaven Collins from Tulsa, I think is a better football player than Micah Parsons. Football player. I think he has better instincts, and I think he's more versatile. He's not going to test anywhere near what Parsons tests like. And what I mean by that is he's not as explosive athletically. He doesn't have the quickness. With Parsons, it's like when he comes forward into gaps, it's impressive. Like it's Jared Davis impressive. There are, in a good way.
Okay.
In a good way. There are moments where he will overrun stuff, but he is incredibly athletic.
A dog chasing cars?
No, I mean there's a little bit of that, but
there is. Okay.
But Jared Davis looked a little like dog chasing cars at Florida too.
A little.
Yeah.
A lot here though.
Yeah.
And I like Jared. I hate to be mean to Jared.
Some of that's what's in front of him. Give him some help.
I agree.
But you don't currently have help.
No.
So if you add Parsons is going to look a little bit out of sorts as a linebacker, and Collins is a much better player in coverage than Parsons is. He just is. He's a more complete football player. Tulsa didn't use him the way Penn State used Parsons. Tulsa let him play on the edge, and they dropped him into coverage where he was incredibly effective. So if we're looking at, say, pick 20, I think Zaven Collins is totally in the range of a player that you should be looking at and would be very intrigued by. You would.
I don't think, Scott, how many times have we said this? The amount of times that we talk about trading out and the amount of times that they happen are two different things.
Yeah.
The Lions are really a trade down candidate. Now when not up, not between 1 and 6, but fall back.
Let's hope.
They really are. I hope that somebody makes a legitimate call for the Lions, because truth be told, especially when you take a look at this list and all those damn green things on there on Scott's master list, those are guys that are going to be sayonara.
Those are free agents that need to be paid.
There are so many holes that need to be fixed.
And we haven't talked about Romeo Okwara.
Nope.
I mean, he's a player you'd like to have back. He was pretty productive last year.
Absolutely.
There is no money. Even cutting all those guys and restructuring Flowers, I'm not sure you have the money for Kenny and Okwara. You just don't. So then you're talking about getting real exotic with what you're doing with cap and money, and putting money now that's allocated into the future, and I'm not sure that's a wise move. I don't know that handicapping yourself for what might happen 2 years from now is smart to put a player or two on the field this year.
Yep.
So that's where the Galladay thing is. Now, Galladay's a great player. It's just, does he fit with where they are? I don't know. But his decision will drive the free agency stuff with the Lions. And if you found a partner for him and, I guess they could transition tag him and let him negotiate with other teams. That's a possibility too. But there's some ramifications for that and some unknown with that. So, that's going to be the driver of a lot of this. I can't see a scenario in which he returns and where they add a bunch of other free agent pieces. I just don't think there's money to do that. But in the draft, that's where you can, positionally look at what makes sense for where they are at 7. And I don't even think we need to include the Galladay thing in the conversation. Wide receiver should be in play for them at 7.
100%.
It absolutely should.
I know people don't like to hear it, but, Scott, all right, let's play a game of pretend. The Lions can't fall back. There's no good offer. They can't fall back. If my choices in that point in time are, say, Parsons or two of the 3 wide receivers people are talking about, you have to go with one of the wide receivers.
Yeah.
You really do.
You do.
I mean, and I get it. I get your logic. I mean, the flip side of that is I can hear people saying, well, wait a second. Aren't you guys both 2 guys that think that value can be had later? Yes, and it can be had later. And you know what? You could do both.
You can take one at 7 and one in round 3.
You really can.
You need more than one.
It's not crazy, and God forbid even beyond, Kenny Galladay, whatever the case may be. You get one in the 4th, the 5th, something like that. But, yeah, it's – well, those are the things that we have to talk about, though. I mean, there's a realistic possibility of that happening.
Yes, there is, and it's the most likely thing that happens
I agree.
is that they're stuck there.
Yeah, that's
the wild card there is the offensive tackle position, and does this group of decision makers value a player who could slide to them? I'm not saying even Penny Sewell's available, but if Rashawn Slater was around at pick 7, and you knew that he could be a high-end guard or a legit starting tackle, is he a player that might be best player on their board? Maybe. So, that's a reasonable position to look.
I've heard you say this now a couple times in the last few weeks, and I really wish you wouldn't say it.
Uh-oh.
Sewell's not going to be there, right?
He really should not be there.
Okay. But you've mentioned it twice, and that kind of, it's almost like you're taunting me.
Well,
you're holding that piece of pizza in front of me going, Sean.
But we're talking about all these quarterbacks, right? Yeah. We're talking, let's say 3 go in the top 6.
I really think that's how it's going to happen.
Let's say Kyle Pitts goes in the top 6, because he's like the weapon in this class.
That's 4. One of the wide receivers is 5.
Okay, and if Cincinnati decides that we took Jonah, I'm not saying that they should do this.
No, I get what you're saying.
We took Jonah Williams. He's our left tackle. We can't take Penny Sewell because
you have to take Sewell. You have to.
It is no-brainer.
Zero run.
Yes.
To the.
Now, the chances of that happening are less than,
I really wish you wouldn't say that to me because it makes me happy.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And I need happy
moments. Sorry, but I'm also not sorry because I made you happy by making you unhappy. It's anything. Other positions, I do think the linebacker position is something to think about, but not at 7, period. So the linebacker position gets opened up if you trade down. Let's say we have talked Washington for a little while. You end up at 19, and in that scenario, you grab a future first and a 3rd this year. Zaven Collins is a guy you'd be looking at long and hard there.
Okay.
You're still looking at receiver in that scenario, but it opens up the door to possibilities. You could go pass rusher there. The Lions have a lot of holes. They have a lot of needs, and it's not like you fill a few this year and you're a finished product. There's a lot of holes. You need to address a lot of things. So moving down in the draft allows you to address maybe a position that you wouldn't take at 7. Like, I don't think you're taking pass rusher at 7.
No.
But you might at 19. There are going to be options there. So positionally, I think that the realistic way to look at where we are right now, pre-free agency, looking at how many holes on their roster they need to fill with guys that are their own free agents, and understanding that we don't expect any big signings. We don't expect a lot of money movement to be happening. It's receiver, it's off-ball linebacker at some point in the draft. Do they need a corner?
Yes, later.
Okay. So
They do. They definitely need.
you
a corner.
always you can't have enough
collect 'em.
corners. You can't have
collect 'em.
enough receivers.
You have a nice collection of corners.
Yes. And and we expect Okudah to make that leap. If you're cutting Trufant, you're really expecting him to make that leap because it's Oruwariye and then Okudah and some just depth pieces behind him. I would say that if you're doing that, maybe corner is more.
Do I have a right to be as excited about Oruwariye as I am?
No, you should be excited. He's looked very viable.
I really like him, especially Now he didn't have the struggles that maybe Okudah did in year one because certainly there was more help and he had a full offseason and everything. But I saw a step, and I'm not saying that he's going to go all Pro Bowl like Slay did and everything, but I think that's a guy that can be there for years and be a good piece.
Yeah, he was protected in his first year. Slay was there. He wasn't asked to do much in year one. In year two, he played a lot, but Okudah was asked to do a lot last year early because Trufant got hurt.
Yep.
And it happened quick, and it just kind of threw him into the fire a little too soon. So, the Okudah thing, he's fine. Is he going to be a great NFL player? Time will tell. But it's more that we shouldn't take that position out of the possibility. We should not. Obviously, we've talked quarterback. We're going to talk quarterback some more. We're going to be into looking at, like we said, wide receiver, tackle, corner, off-ball linebacker. Just depends on where they end up in round one. If they're stuck at 7, I think, to me, the mentality is wide receiver, and it's sort of focused on that. Even if you bring back Galladay, Galladay is going to be he's 28, right?
Yeah.
So, this is where this comes in is if you're not competing for a couple years, he's 30, 31 years old. You've paid him $17, $18 million for a few seasons in which you didn't expect to compete. I don't know if that's good process.
He's going to be 28 midway point next year.
Yeah. I'm not sure that's great process. I just, I would understand it if they brought him back. He's a really good football player. And just pawning him off makes you sad that here we are. This is where we are.
But you have to get something from him.
We're at a point.
Especially if you got increased value for him from where he was picked.
Listen,
isn't that the name of the game?
Absolutely. And if we are truly talking about a rebuild, a total rebuild, then that is what has to happen.
It's their words, not ours.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, when they're telling you don't expect, we're expecting to be competitive in 2 to 3 years, and they sign Campbell to a 6-year deal, they're telling you. They're telling you it's going to take time.
Can we expect the Lions to? I mean, obviously Jared Goff is the starter. Do you think Blau they're going to actually roll with him as the backup? I mean, that's something we have to ask ourselves.
I think that's more likely than anything right now. I mean,
because I don't expect it to be Chase.
Well, cutting him saves you some money.
Absolutely,
I mean, it saves you $2.3 million, and they're in a position where they need it. They do. Now, if you're tagging and trading Kenny, maybe you don't need, that $2.3 million, but that'll be an interesting decision to see what they choose to do. Is he a developmental player? Is Blau developmental behind Goff? And would they trust him if Goff were injured? Would they trust him to play? And I think they're in a position where we're rebuilding and not expecting to be all that competitive. So if Goff were to go down, we would probably prefer to play a quarterback who might develop into something for us, as opposed to a guy who's been in the league for as long as Daniel has, and is sort of limited, right? It's not like he's going to turn into something where, look what he turned into for us. He's you know what I mean? He's a consistent, very backup quarterback where we don't know what Blau is. So there's some unknown with what he is.
So if you were looking at this right now, because there are a myriad of things that need to be done, make no mistake about that. If you were looking at this right now, what would be your optimum? I mean, it's a trade out, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. The trade down to get another.
That way.
So the trade down to acquire another first round pick in next year's draft is, I think, that's the optimal thing that could happen. The thing that should be intriguing behind that is this. We don't expect the Lions to be super competitive, so we think they're going to be drafting somewhat early next year, right? Is that fair?
I think
Do we
very
think it's top
fair.
10?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you know what I always remind people, though, Scott?
elevator?
Yeah, well, and as bad as the Lions were last year, they're still picking 7th. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's what's crazy about that. Now, do I expect them to go back with losing more talent and replacing Stafford with Jared Goff? I do, but they could mess around, go 5-11, and get the 10th pick overall. I mean, that's the National Football League now.
It is. So let's say you have the 10th pick and you make a trade to grab, say, Washington's pick, right? And which is 19 this year and their future first. Let's say that's pick 20 in the next draft. And then you have the Rams pick, which is going to be in the mid. So you have 3 different tiers of first round picks, and it allows you 3 different types of players in that draft.
That's beautiful.
Which is, I think, the way they should be looking at this.
And it's the way that I've watched other teams, whether it be the Arizona Cardinals from taking advantage of Bill O'Brien, whether it be the Miami Dolphins. Like, wow, look at all those picks that teams have. Cleveland. We watch other teams do that. And is it any coincidence? That you've seen those teams go like this in the last few years?
No, and that you could see the Lions do that.
I hope so.
Relatively quickly, because we're going to see cap space open up too.
Yep, absolutely. All right, anything else before we get out of here, pal?
No, next week we'll get back into some positional stuff. We just wanted to cover kind of a where are they now type thing before free agency.
No, I'm glad that you did it. Do they bring Don Muhlbach back?
Good question.
Matt Prater.
I don't know.
Do they give him real? You know what? My guess is, based on what we saw out of Prater last year, still a darn good kicker, but
A step back.
Took a step back last year. I bet you there's a pretty good competition next year.
There should be.
I bet you there's a pretty good competition.
There should be, and I don't know what it's going to.
Whereas before, if you hey, look, we brought in a kicker with Matt Prater. I bet you there's a pretty good competition.
There should be.
So, all right, so that's going to do it. Scott, we're still about? Let me do the math. About 2 months and 2 weeks away.
I don't know what day it is, and I don't really know what month it is, so I don't. I should not have admitted that, but I did.
Hi, COVID. How are you?
Yeah.
No, thank you as always for joining us. If you have any comments, make sure that you hit either one of us up. We appreciate it.
Ask questions on Twitter if you want.
By all means. He's very accessible. Our man Fish doing all the work in the other room. We appreciate you as well, Fish. Make sure you check out all the fine stuff on Woodward Sports Network. Until next week, for Scott Bischoff, I'm Sean Baligian saying see ya.